All right, welcome to the Entheogenic Explorers podcast. I'm Kirby. I've got with me in the studio Sean McAllister today. Sean is a psychedelic attorney, but as always, I don't like to give background on folks. I like them to tell us a little bit about themselves in a nutshell. And Sean, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Kirby, nice to be here in my pilgrim hat, sinking into the feeling of this hat. It does have a nice feather on the side. That's one of my favorite things. But yeah, introduce myself. Geez, a human being who's in recovery from Western culture and being male and having been a lawyer for 23 years. I'm in a state of evolving. I'm in a emergent quality. I'm a ripening soul out of a traumatic plasma all around me. I'm an interdimensional being, but what I get to do with my daily life is actually practice law around psychedelics and cannabis. And as I was talking to you before, I mean, it's basically a dream. All I do every day is talk about my favorite topic, which is spiritual exploration and how we can bring spirit into the law, how we can protect people in this litigious American society, not only from civil litigation, but God forbid, from criminal litigation. And so I'm a guy that's had 25 years in drug policy reform. I hope I don't look this old, but I am 50 years old now. And when I was in law school, it was the mid 90s. And the drug war was raging. We saw exponential growth of our prison systems. In the mid 90s in Colorado, where I live, prison budgets had risen to the third highest priority in our state budget: healthcare, education, then prisons. And we literally were seeing dollars taken away from education and healthcare so that we could warehouse nonviolent drug offenders. And I was going to be an environmental lawyer, and in a weird way, I think I still am. But when I saw this social justice catastrophe all around me, I said, geez, maybe we should do something about the drug war. It seems like a really unproductive idea and based on outdated models and, tough on crime, not smart on crime. And so, I'm just another guy that's part of this intergenerational transformation that we're a part of, from tough on crime and lock people up to more of a public health approach on drug and substance abuse issues. And if people need treatment, maybe they go to treatment, or if people don't need treatment, maybe they're left alone. But certainly people that should have some autonomy with their own bodies to decide what their state of consciousness is. And so that's kind of the ethical, spiritual driving point of my career has been to give life to those values. And I'm a values-driven lawyer. So I'm really only interested in things that I care about, and I don't want to just lawyer for lawyer's sake. And so that's meant that I won't go on too long here, but just to give you the big arc, in 2004, I started a nonprofit in Colorado called Sensible Colorado that was focused on mostly cannabis. It really intended to do all drugs, but cannabis was the low-hanging fruit. And so I started the organization that co-chaired all the campaigns to legalize cannabis in Colorado. And of course, I went on a 12-year run as a cannabis and hemp lawyer, doing business law and litigation and regulatory, helping establish the cannabis industry. And somewhere along the way, in the last few years, I started losing my passion about cannabis. Yes, it's a beautiful sacred plant and deserves to be legal and protected. But the industry had become what all industries seem to become in America: really consolidated, big money. I went from representing former illicit market growers with the same moral and ethical beliefs as me to representing these, big venture capitalist folks that had no connection to any, plant sacredness, and really just were looking to turn a dollar on cannabis. And so that pushed me away from cannabis, and I started focusing on psychedelics 5 or 6 years ago. And it also corresponded with some trauma that I've shared with you and a lot of others in a public forum with my ex-wife and a divorce and my children kind of being alienated from me in a way. Complicated story, but lots of trauma. I've got a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and as you as a father of a 5-year-old, imagine going a few years without seeing that beautiful child and the trauma that would impose on you. And so there's a happy story about this, that I'm reuniting with my kids, but it was part of the driving force that pushed me to plant medicine in a ceremonial way. And I'm just another guy with a typical story. I like to joke, white guy goes to Costa Rica, drinks ayahuasca, wants to change the world. And, this is becoming an ever more common story, but no, I think these medicines really call us to give back and to think about the ways we can give to others. And so I came back and said, how do I help psychedelics and ayahuasca in particular, 5-MeO, which have been some of my primary medicines that I've worked with, psilocybin. And the last 5 years have been beautiful. I've become a board of directors member of the Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines, and we're doing great work around reciprocity and giving back to indigenous people and raising awareness on the cutting edge issues in psychedelics. I've become the general counsel of the Zendo Project, which is my cool new gig with the hat and everything. Get to help the Zendo folks think about how to carry out harm reduction and trip sitting for people, peer supported trip sitting. I've represent numerous doctors and therapists in Colorado that want to engage in psychedelic assisted therapy. I've represented, over a dozen psychedelic churches, ayahuasca churches and psilocybin churches. And I'm actually co-counsel on a piece of litigation right now where we're suing the government on behalf of the Church of Eagle and Condor to get recognition for an ayahuasca church, which would be only the third church ever formally recognized by the government. So, I've been fortunate to work in all these different areas, doctors and therapists, traditional practitioners, religious use, and also in the policy world. And so very proud, obviously, of Colorado, which just passed Prop 122, the Natural Medicine Health Act that decriminalized 4 psychedelics in the state, psilocybin, mescaline, other than peyote, iboga, and did I say psilocybin? Psilocybin, mescaline, DMT, and iboga. There you go. God, an important one, DMT. So I know I'm covering a lot of things here, but that's the big picture introduction. I've done a lot of different things in the space, and we're still at the very beginning, and I'm very excited about what's coming, but also know there's going to be a lot of challenges. And so for all the joy and beauty that's coming, there's probably an equal part pain and suffering that people are going to go through, and the growing pains and the mistakes and the prosecutions and the civil litigation. And so unfortunately in America, lawyers have a full-time job because there's no end of issues around the law and psychedelics. And so I'm hoping that someday I'll step out of this, but I've got a career as long as the eye can see here. And I'm very grateful and humbled and grateful to be associated with people like you. Thanks for having me on.
No, I appreciate it. And you brought up a few things. I'll try to pick these apart one at a time. The first word is, again, drugs. We hear the word drugs mentioned quite a bit. Drugs. I think it's a funny term, right? But you also use the word sacraments and medicine. So again, I don't know if I'm able to share that one of the reasons that also you're on How We Know Each Other is you helped us set up our church. So you're the counsel for our church. And I get a lot of questions from members and folks that are part of the community. They don't understand the concept behind the church.
Yes.
Why do you need a church? Why are you calling it a sacrament? Because as you could assume here in the Midwest where I'm at specifically, church, sacrament, that's not a Christian church or Christian sacrament. The next words are cult, and what's going on over there. So can you explain again,
Yeah.
even if you want to, how we are set up as a church? You have my full permission to share anything about us,
Yeah.
but like, what are you doing essentially, and why are you doing it in the format that you're doing to help folks?
Yeah, this is a beautiful topic. It covers a lot of areas. I think I'm a little emotional about it, even because, look, you and I and everybody around us, around our age, we're part of the second or third generation of Americans that really identify as spiritual, not religious. We believe we have a spiritual life, we have a connection to God, or a source in some way. But we are defining what it means to be spiritual, not religious. We're breaking away from the historical confines of institutionalized religion, and we're reclaiming some of our own indigenous traditions. I don't know your ancestry. I'm Celtic and Irish and Scottish by ancestry, and certainly, my ancestors 1,000 years ago, before they were Christianized, they were sitting in circles and praying to an earth-based mother and engaging in ceremonial practices. There's plenty of evidence, I think, that Celtic people used mushrooms. There's a shamanistic figure in Celtic folklore that's holding up what looks like a mushroom or a chalice for mushroom and horn. Anyways, it's beautiful. And this is a long way of saying, people are uncomfortable with the concept of religion, but it is one of the areas that the United States was founded on religious freedom. And whether you're conservative or liberal, there's a lot of respect for religious practices. And so there's a law called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that was passed in the mid-90s that basically says if you're engaged in sincere religious practice, you can be exempt from conflicting federal laws. And so when you ask, like, why do we have to be a church, or why are you talking about it in this manner? I mean, I think we all need to understand that we have this Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Obviously, Western culture in America thinks about religion like they think about Christianity or Judaism or Islam. They want to see a Bible. They want to see doctrine. They want to see hierarchy. Some of the questions the government has had for medicine practitioners is like, well, what happens if people violate your ethical, oaths? Do they go to hell, or do they get punished? And it's always a funny question, because a lot of times people look around, they're like, we just love each other more if you do the wrong thing, we just keep loving, maybe healthy boundaries, but anyway, so the point is that the law isn't really designed to understand a broad spiritual practice. And we are kind of shoehorning our spiritual beliefs into this regime. I think it works, but terms like religion are just, tough for some Americans to deal with. And I think what it shows is that there's a bias against kind of indigenous worldview or earth-based or experiential religions, because those, if you go to the Shipibo people in Peru and say, well, show me your doctrine, or, I don't know, the Mazatec people in Mexico, like, what are the principles of your religion? They're going to say, that's not really the way it works. Like, we're in relationship with the earth and the spirits and our ancestors and the higher powers, and we divine truth in the experience. We find, the teaching in the moment. It's a relational thing that's not about understanding a book. It's about true experience and direct experience. And so the Western law doesn't really like that. They want to see these traditional things. So I think the answer to your question is that this is the only way right now that you really can have an exemption to the Federal Controlled Substances Act. And it does sort of fit what we're doing. I mean, we're engaging in a sacred practice. We're sitting in circle. We're holding each other in community. We're supporting each other. that feels like kind of what a religion or a church does. And so I understand people's hesitancy, but if we don't at least try to fit into this model, then I think we're much more at risk. And there's certainly a lot of cases of people who've been arrested with mushrooms and with ayahuasca. And if they don't have that kind of religious defense or spiritual defense, they're in a bad spot. And they're probably going to take a plea deal, and they're probably going to get, a record of some kind. So, what I think is, like, practitioners like you, a lot of times really what they're doing is trying to protect their participants. They're willing to take the risk themselves, but they don't want anybody else to get in trouble. And of course, it would be nice to protect yourself. So I mean, for all those reasons, I think it makes a lot of sense to at least try to put down on paper what you believe and talk about that in the experience so that people can repeat later, like, yeah, Kirby told me 5-MeO connects me with my divine self, and we find the truth in the experience, and it will resolve trauma. Otherwise, if somebody just says, well, Kirby said this would be a lot of fun if we use 5-MeO, it's a vulnerable position to be. And I know that's not how you do it, but
those words, 5-MeO will be fun. Yeah. I can assure you it never crossed my lips, because that would be a bold-faced lie. But to your point, I find it fascinating, again, because one of the questions I had that we've already been tiptoeing on is, what is a religion, right? So when you say the word religion, it seems from a legal standpoint, they're really talking about the main religions. That was the framework that everything's kind of bound upon. But you hit the point, the experiential difference between them. And I find that fascinating. Somebody that identified heavily with a Christian, to the point where I had a Christian radio show, I had a Christian business.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was down that rabbit hole, and I still have a lot of respect for and all those. My beliefs just changed.
Of course.
But the problem with these dogmas of these organized religions is something that you said it does work, and we've been able to make it work with our church in the sense that we have these beliefs, but they're not so restrictive that it's creating trauma. And where I'm seeing trauma created in a lot of the more organized spaces is because you become part of this community. And if your beliefs change from that community, you're no longer part of that community, right? So a lot of folks will stay in community or stay in uncomfortable positions that they don't believe for fear of losing this connection with their community. So, can you have this religion, which we have this, where people can have these experiential beliefs, right? Anything that has to do with any of the DMTs, it's an experiential belief versus this is what Matthew, Mark, Luke, John said. So I find it fascinating all the time when I'm thinking about a religion, as far as it seems from a legal standpoint, is, well, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John said that, so that's okay. Although I've had a direct experience with the divine, we don't, that's not good enough, but that is. So it seems like pretty shaky ground when you look on it to say, hey, that's I would love to be able to have a debate with something like, that's a religion, but this isn't. How is that even? Yeah, anyhow. I find it interesting.
Yeah, you said a lot of things. Yeah, a lot of things there that jump out at me. And yeah, I think, what do I want to say? That, I've previously, like you, I was raised a Christian and had also gone to the Unitarian Church at some point. And so a lot of the things that medicine people are talking about, and I know you were talking about, are actually similar to recognized religions right now. If you look at the Unitarians, they believe basically many roads, one mountain. So they celebrate the Christian tradition, the Jewish tradition, all sacred traditions, and they believe they're essentially worshiping the same God. And so they're incorporating all these different beliefs into what they do. And I had this really beautiful experience in India in October. I was there for my 50th birthday on some spiritual work, and one of the temples in Delhi is called the Lotus Temple, and it was beautiful. This amazing, 1,000-foot lotus in the middle of a garden. It was created by I think it's called Baha'i or Bahia religion. It was founded in Saudi Arabia, and basically the Baha'is believe that all cultures are worshiping the same God, that their different sacraments and their different methods just reflect their cultural upbringing and background, but ultimately we're all celebrating the same God. And so there's no, iconography, there's no cross, there's no Jewish star in this church. It just celebrates all those things in one simple place. And that feels like what we're doing in plant medicine work. We're saying we honor the indigenous and we honor our own traditions. And so, yeah, I feel like, honestly, the government hasn't had a very good attempt, or hasn't had a good record of challenging people's religious sincerity. So the key thing is that it's just not a sham. I think there's a joke out there that there was the Church of the Spaghetti Monster. And yeah, I think if you worship the Spaghetti Monster or SpaghettiOs or something, that would be probably seen as a joke. But for people that actually have sincere beliefs, that's the critical thing. And so, yeah, so I think this provides a lot of protection for us. It's evidence of how complicated it is, though. Yeah. We're talking about a federal law, and then actually each state's law is different. And, my Brazilian friend is like, God, America is so complicated. Federal laws, state laws, municipal laws. Like in Brazil, we have one law, yeah. And so it's evidence of how complicated our system is, that unfortunately, I think it really does take a lawyer to explain these things and understand how to operate, because until Colorado decriminalized psychedelics, you could have federal protections in Colorado as a church, but actually the state law was the opposite. It said you don't get an exception from drug laws if you are engaged in religious practice. So, it just sort of depends on which level of government is coming after you as to whether you're protected in different states. And I think it's overly complicated, and I hope in the coming years that DEA and other agencies will create a clear pathway for this kind of behavior. But I think they're trying to keep a lid on it. They're scared of it right now.
Yeah, it's highly complicated. You name it. Like just literally where I'm at, yeah. One law. I drive four hours. Yes. Completely different law, and they couldn't be more drastically different. It's not like they're warm. Drastically different. Felony to no problem. Instantly. Yeah, exactly. on an imaginary line. That makes absolutely no sense. But of course it makes sense. Again, I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah.
So for folks, we've got folks out here, we're in Iowa. They just started Decrim Iowa. They're trying to follow similar steps that some other states have taken to obviously soften the laws here. Any advice for folks stepping into that space?
Yeah, I think we can learn a lot of lessons from the civil rights movements and the LGBTQ movements. I like the idea of, it's time to out ourselves and to come out of the closet and be above ground and talk to elected leaders about our sacred experiences, our traumatic healing. I think decision makers, it's always going to be more powerful if there's a human story behind the position. If you just go tell people decriminalize psychedelics, they're good for people. It's like, okay, you're an advocate, you're a zealot, obviously you're whatever, maybe a user. But if you say my mother suffered for 40 years from chronic depression and she started taking microdoses of mushrooms and now she's able to get out of the house and work at the library, and you tell a story like that, it's really powerful for these decision makers. Our politicians, it's funny because they always pretend that they're leading, we're your leaders and we're going to go out there and lead. But honestly, they really are more followers, because it really does take, until there's sort of societal consensus that this is what we want. These politicians are not going to step out on this issue. Local governments or state governments, whatever it is, federal, they often don't see much benefit from advocating for these aggressive reforms like we're talking about, because they get a lot of calls from people that are concerned about drug use and decriminalization and saying, how could they'll get accused of being a legalizer or drug drug facilitator or something. And so they're very shy about advocating for our issue. And that's why most of the reform in this area has come from states where you can put something directly on a ballot, like Colorado, a ballot initiative, or California, or Washington, or Oregon. And, that's because these politicians don't have the incentive to come out and talk about the issue. And we actually are the majority. I mean, this is the thing that all of us need to understand, is that pretty much every time in progressive states that we try to decriminalize or legalize drugs, we have won. We're now at 40 states with some kind of legalized cannabis, and more states coming online with psychedelics. And this is the winning side of the argument. We have the majority of people. It's just the politicians are afraid to go out in front. So, it's better if you have a ballot initiative process. You're going to bang your head against the wall of politicians for a lot of years, or you could just go right to the people and show them that we're the majority. And the same thing at the local level. Sometimes there's local referendum or ballot initiatives. And that's really how all these movements were started, is a decriminalization effort at the city level. And we did that in Denver in 2019. We said no criminal penalties for possession and personal use of psilocybin. First city in the nation to ever do that. And guess what? We had a panel to review the impacts of the law, and I was on that. And the panel said there have been no negative consequences to the city of Denver from decriminalizing mushrooms. We don't have one case of a guy running out into the park, I don't know, doing something weird or attacking people. Nothing. There's no examples of this. And so that's a powerful message to the public and decision makers, that their fears are a little bit unfounded. And we're seeing that again, though, in Colorado. People are already trying to react to this decriminalization we just did, and they're thinking about limiting it in some way. So, we're even going to have to be vigilant here in Colorado to keep our protections that we have, because I think the system is inherently conservative and doesn't want to do anything, really. It would like to have status quo forever. It has to be pushed to do anything different.
Well, I'd love to have you on more often, even if it's just 15-minute chats to kind of catch people up on what's happening out there, how they could be involved, what to look out for. And the objective of this is to give information that could help folks step into ceremony, understand what's happening in the psychedelic community with safety. I don't know if this is a yes or no question, then I'll let you close up. Do you, because I'm leading you here. Yeah, I won't ask it. That'll be a leading question. You'll be like, that's a leading question, Your Honor. Let me close with this then. Who can you help? So folks that are listening right now, I know you're a busy guy. You're not taking on probably a ton of cases, but folks out there that are listening, who are your people, so to speak, and how do they get hold of you?
Okay, I am going to answer that question, and I'm guessing I want to just bridge from that last discussion and tell people that, look, there's a lot of ways to get involved. There's great groups out there. The Chacruna Institute, which I'm part of, MAPS, has a big psychedelic science conference this summer in Denver in June of 2023. There's the Chacruna conference in San Francisco in April, the weekend of April 22nd. There is the Psychedelics Today conference in LA, March 30th. There's a lot of venues out there where this is getting discussed and what opportunities there are. And so people definitely should plug into some of those, network and meet people that are saying the things they want to hear, and they can find a way to give back and participate. But yeah, in terms of me, I mean, I'm definitely doing those things I said. I'm working with doctors and therapists, churches, doing some policy work, even talking about doing a little lobbying work on this Prop 122 to protect it in Colorado. And the biggest thing is I'm really giving back first, and I'm in a mode of I want to give first, and good things will happen. So anybody can set up a call with me. Look at McAllisterLawOffice.com, McAllister, McAllisterLawOffice.com, and email me. My email's on there, and we'll set a call. And I pretty much talk to anybody for 20 or 30 minutes for free. just to, give them a feel of what's going on and hear what they're thinking and talk about the challenges that they're going to face and, maybe find a pathway for them to get involved, because that's why I'm doing all this. Just like you, I want more people to have access to the medicine, more healing to happen, a better society, family trauma being resolved for a lot of people. And so I'm a resource. Reach out to me. Happy to talk to anybody anytime.
Well, you're doing it. I mean, again, it's interesting. You may think this, I may not think it, but it's just the facts. I wouldn't be serving if I hadn't met you. I mean, I wouldn't be serving. We wouldn't have our church set up. So any impact that anybody would wrongfully attribute to anything that I've done, would also be wrongfully attributed to what you've done, right? It's a trickle down effect. So I'd like to
Yeah.
think that there's some people in this area that are doing better because of the work that you've kind of helped initiate. So you are making a massive impact. And again, I've worked with you. I was in the professional world for 30 years.
Yeah.
You're good. So if folks are looking for anything along the lines, reach out. Don't take advantage of the time. But if you've got serious work, I've
Yeah.
sent some of my therapist friends to you. Even if he doesn't have the answer, he's got them to the right
Yeah.
folks. So
Exactly.
he's just a good guy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I appreciate you giving us this time. I know you've got a busy day, and I do. I appreciate you giving it to us. So thank you.
No problem, Kirby. I look forward to being with you in person one of these days, finally, maybe soon. So hope to see
It's
you.
going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm looking forward to it.